Scotland, they say, is a land of mists and ancient sorrows. In the county of East Lothian, sometime in the late 15th or perhaps early 16th century, a boy was born. His name, or the name history would give him, was Alexander Sawney Bean. He entered a world of hard toil, of crofts and fields, of prayer and obedience. These things, it seemed, held little appeal for young Sawney. He was not like the other lads, content with the sweat of their brow or the calloused hands that came from honest labour. He preferred idleness, a sullen kind of contemplation. His father was a ditch-digger, a hedger, a man of the earth. He tried to teach his son the trades. Sawney learned, but did not love. The work felt like a chain. He watched the others, their simple lives, their simple faiths. He felt a disconnect, a sourness in his belly. Some said he was merely lazy, others whispered of a darkness coiling within him, a shadow that stretched long even in the midday sun. He had a temper, quick and brutal, a disdain for rules, a hunger for something other than what life offered him. On its plain, unappetizing plate, then he found her. Or perhaps she found him. A woman, some called her Black Agnes Douglas, though her true name is lost to the winds like so much else from that time. She was, they say, as disinclined to piety and hard work as Sawney himself. Some whispered she dabbled in darker arts, that her soul was already forfeit. She saw in Sawney a kindred spirit, a reflection of her own wildness. He saw in her a companion for a journey away from the light, away from the judging eyes of the kirk and community. Together, they were a spark ready to ignite a terrible fire. They did not marry. There was no blessing sought, no vows exchanged before God. They simply left, turned their backs on East Lothian, on the lives they were expected to lead. They walked away from the fields, the villages, the little cottages with their smoking chimneys. They sought a place where the rules of men did not reach, where they could carve out an existence on their own terms, however brutal those terms might be. Their departure was unmourned, a quiet riddance. Some might have thought. They had no idea what they were unleashing upon the world, these two shadows slipping away into the west. Their journey took them west, across the breadth of southern Scotland, towards the rugged, unforgiving coastline of Ayrshire, a place of cliffs and churning seas, of hidden coves and desolate moors. Here the land itself seemed to hold its breath, wary of intruders. They sought solitude, a place to disappear, a place where their burgeoning darkness could take root and flourish, unseen, unheard. The towns and villages grew sparse, the wilderness beckoned, promising anonymity and freedom from the constraints of the world they had so utterly rejected. They were two against the world, or so they believed. They found it near Ballantrae, a cave, not just any cave, Bannan Cave. Its entrance was a secret, a gaping maw hidden by the high tide, revealed only when the waters drew back their grey curtain. Twice a day the sea would seal their sanctuary, making it impregnable, invisible. The cave stretched deep into the cliffs, a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, dark and damp. It was perfect. A natural fortress, a place where they could be kings and queens of their own squalid domain, a place to begin their terrible reign, far from the prying eyes of God or man. This cavern became their home, their larder, their abattoir, their nursery. The cold stone walls echoed with their whispers, then later with other less human sounds. They furnished it not with comfort but with the grim necessities of their chosen life. The sea brought them driftwood for fires, its roar a constant lullaby, or perhaps a warning. The isolation was complete. They were cut off, adrift in their stone womb, reborn into a new savage existence. Here they would not be Sawney the ditch-digger's son, and Agnes the outcast. Here they would be something new, something monstrous. In the beginning it was just the two of them, alone against the elements, against hunger. Petty theft was their first recourse, stealing from lonely travellers, from isolated farms. But this was not enough. It did not satisfy the gnawing emptiness either in their bellies or their souls. A darker pact was forged in the flickering firelight of that cave. a pact written in desperation and sealed with a dawning, terrible understanding. The world had rejected them. Now they would reject its most sacred taboos. They would survive, no matter the cost, no matter the horror. The transition was grimly inevitable. Petty theft escalated. Robbery became their trade. They would lie in wait, hidden in the gorse and shadows along the lonely coastal roads. Unsuspecting travelers, merchants, pilgrims, anyone unfortunate enough to pass their way. At first, perhaps, they only sought to rob, but witnesses were a problem. Dead men tell no tales, the old saying goes. And Sawney Bean, along with his fierce companion, learned this lesson well. Murder became an extension of theft, a necessary precaution, a chillingly practical solution to the problem of survival and secrecy. Then came the darkest step, the one that would etch their name into the annals of infamy. Cannibalism. Food was scarce on that desolate coast, especially for outcasts who dared not show their faces in any town or village. The bodies of their victims, however, were plentiful. It was a horrifying logic, a desperate pragmatism. No waste, no evidence left for the crows or the tides. They began to butcher their victims, treating human flesh as they might any other meat. This was not just survival. This was a descent into an abyss from which there could be no return. Their methods were brutal, efficient. Once a victim was slain, the body would be dragged back to the cave. There, in the flickering torchlight, the grim work would begin. Dismemberment, the flesh stripped from the bones. Some parts would be consumed fresh, cooked over their driftwood fires. Other parts, they say, were salted, pickled, preserved in barrels, stored away in the deeper recesses of the cavern for leaner times. The cave became a charnel house, its tunnels echoing with the sounds of butchery, its air thick with the stench of death and decay, mingled with the salt of the sea. For years, perhaps decades, they operated with impunity. People vanished. Travelers set out and never reached their destinations. Shepherds lost their way. The disappearances mounted. Fear spread along the Galloway coast like a creeping sickness. Tales were told of demons, of sea monsters, of dark enchantment. No one suspected the truth. No one could imagine the horror that lurked within Ballantrae Cave. The Bean clan, for it was becoming a clan, was a cancer growing unseen, feeding on the unwary, their existence a whispered dread, a chilling mystery that haunted the region. Years bled into decades within the confines of Ballantrae Cave. Sawney and Agnes were prolific. Children were born into this world of shadows and slaughter, sons and daughters who knew no other life. They grew up within the cave's damp embrace, their playground the blood-stained rocks, their lullabies the screams of the dying and the roar of the ocean. They learned their parents' trade. Ambush, murder, butchery. These were the skills passed down from one generation to the next. A horrific apprenticeship in the family business of death. Isolation breeds strange fruit. Confined to their cave with no contact with the outside world, the clan turned inwards. Inbreeding became a grim necessity, a terrible consequence of their seclusion. Sons lay with their mothers, brothers with their sisters. Daughters bore children to their own father. The bloodlines tangled, thickened, producing a brood that was increasingly feral, increasingly divorced from common humanity. They were a tribe apart, bound by blood, by shared guilt, and by the monstrous secrets of their existence. Their loyalty was absolute to Sawney, the patriarch, the monster who had sired them all. The clan grew, from 2 to a dozen to perhaps 48 souls, if the legends are to be believed. A grotesque extended family, men, women, children, each one a predator, each one a cannibal. They hunted in packs, a coordinated force of savagery. Their understanding of the outside world was limited to what they could glean from their victims, from the trinkets and clothes they plundered. They spoke a debased form of Scots, guttural and harsh. They were the bogeymen made real, a hidden society thriving on the fringes of civilization. Their numbers made them bolder, more reckless. The disappearances became more frequent, more brazen. They were a plague upon the land, a hidden army of ghouls, yet still no one knew. No one suspected the sheer scale of the horror. The local authorities were baffled, attributing the losses to bandits, to wolves, to the treacherous currents of the sea. The Bean clan remained secure in their watery fortress, their numbers swelling, their hunger insatiable, a dynasty of death flourishing in the dark, unknown and unimaginable to the world above. Section 5. The night the hunt went wrong. A crack in the facade. All reigns, however dark, eventually face a reckoning. For the Bean clan, that moment arrived on a moonless night. They had grown accustomed to easy prey, to victims who succumbed with little resistance. This night, they chose poorly. A man and his wife were returning from a local fair, perhaps a little merry, their minds on home and hearth. The Beans, a large hunting party of them, emerged from the shadows, silent and sudden, like wolves upon sheep. They swarmed the couple, expecting a quick, brutal end to their hunt. But the husband was not so easily taken. He was strong, armed with a sword and perhaps a pistol. He fought back with the fury of a cornered badger, desperate to protect his wife. He cut down several of his attackers, his blade a silver flash in the darkness. But the numbers were against him. He saw his wife dragged from her horse, screaming. He heard her cries abruptly silenced. The horror of that moment, the sight of his beloved being overwhelmed and butchered before his eyes, fueled a desperate, berserk strength. He fought on, wounded, bleeding, but unbowed. Just as he was about to be overwhelmed, fate intervened, or perhaps it was simply the passage of time. Another group of travellers, larger and better armed, appeared on the road, returning from the same fair. The Beans, startled by this unexpected interruption, their ambush thrown into disarray, their numbers depleted by the husband's fierce resistance, hesitated. This was not their usual way. They preferred darkness, surprise, overwhelming odds. This sudden exposure, this potential for a real fight against armed men, was not to their liking. They melted back into the shadows, dragging their dead and wounded with them, but leaving the butchered remains of the woman behind. The husband, half mad with grief and rage, bloodied but alive, was found by the newcomers. He babbled his horrific tale, a tale of monsters, of a family of devils who had murdered his wife. This time there was a survivor, an eyewitness, someone to point a finger not at vague fears, but at tangible horrors. His story, raw and visceral, could not be dismissed as mere fancy or drunken fear. The carefully constructed secrecy of the Bean clan had been shattered. A crack had appeared in the facade of their hidden kingdom. The outside world, for so long held at bay, was about to come crashing in. Section 6. The King's fury, a reckoning stirred. The news travelled fast, from the shocked travellers to the local magistrate, then onwards, gathering momentum, gathering horror. The tale of the ambushed couple, the murdered wife, the cannibal fiends reached the ears of the highest authority in the land. King James VI of Scotland, soon to be James I of England. The king, a man known for his belief in witchcraft and his stern sense of justice, was reportedly incensed. Such barbarity could not be tolerated within his kingdom. This was an affront to God, to law, to humanity itself. He vowed to see these monsters brought to justice. A royal decree was issued. A great manhunt was organized. This was no mere local affair. The king himself, according to some accounts, resolved to lead the expedition. He gathered a force of some 400 armed men. He brought bloodhounds, renowned for their ability to track scents over any terrain. This was to be a war, not just a capture. A war against an enemy that had festered in the shadows for far too long. The full might of the Scottish crown was now arrayed against the Bean clan. Their isolated existence was about to end violently and decisively. The surviving husband, his heart burning for vengeance, played a crucial role. He led the king's men back to the scene of the ambush. He described his attackers, their feral appearance, their terrifying numbers. The bloodhounds were set loose, their noses to the ground, seeking the scent of the killers. The terrain was difficult, wild and unforgiving. The coastline was a maze of cliffs, coves and hidden inlets. For days the search seemed fruitless. The beans had chosen their lair well. It was a place designed to repel intrusion, to keep its secrets buried deep. But the dogs were relentless, and the king was determined. They scoured the coastline inch by inch. They questioned locals, piecing together the long history of disappearances, the whispered fears that had plagued the region for generations. The net was closing. The sheer scale of the royal force was overwhelming. There was nowhere for the Bean clan to run, nowhere to hide that the king's men would not eventually find. The scent of death, so long a companion to the Beans, was now leading their hunters directly to their doorstep. The game was almost up. Section 7. The cavern unveiled, the grisly truth exposed. The bloodhounds, baying with excitement, finally led the king's men to the coast near Ballantrae. They milled about, agitated, near a particular stretch of cliff face. At high tide there was nothing to see but sheer rock and crashing waves, but the king or his commanders were patient. They waited. As the tide receded, a dark opening began to appear at the base of the cliff, a gaping maw previously hidden by the churning waters. This was it, the entrance to Benane Cave, the lair of Sawney Bean and his monstrous clan. With torches held high, the king's soldiers, perhaps with the king himself among them, cautiously entered the cavern. The air that billowed out was foul, a sickening miasma of stale blood, brine and decay. As they ventured deeper, the true horror of the Bean clan's existence was laid bare. The cave was vast, a network of tunnels and chambers stretching nearly a mile into the rock. The walls were damp, glistening in the torchlight, and everywhere there were signs of unimaginable butchery. Human remains, in various states of dismemberment, hung from the walls like smoked hams. Barrels filled with pickled limbs and organs lined the passageways. Piles of bones, gnawed clean, lay heaped in corners. The stolen goods of countless victims' clothes, jewels, coins were scattered about, a testament to decades of plunder. And then they found them. The Bean clan, all 48 of them, according to legend. Sawney, now an old man, his wife Agnes, their children, their grandchildren, a horde of feral, inbred creatures, blinking in the unaccustomed light of the torches. They offered no resistance. Perhaps they knew their time was over, or perhaps they were simply too stunned, too alien to comprehend their fate. The scene that greeted the king's men was one of unparalleled depravity. It was a vision from hell itself, made real in the cold, damp stone of the earth. The soldiers, hardened men though they were said to have been sickened by the sight, by the stench, by the sheer scale of the inhumanity. The clan was rounded up, bound and dragged from their subterranean kingdom into the light of day. Their reign of terror, which had lasted for perhaps a quarter of a century, was finally at an end. The dark secret of Benane Cave had been exposed to the horrified gaze of the world. Section 8. A grisly reckoning, justice swift and terrible. The captured Bean clan, a grotesque procession of nearly 50 individuals, were not afforded the dignity of a trial. Their guilt was deemed self-evident, their crimes so heinous as to be beyond the scope of normal judicial process. They were taken, some say, to Leith, others to Glasgow, or even directly to Edinburgh to face a punishment as brutal as their own monstrous deeds. The king, it is said, decreed their fate personally. There would be no mercy, only a terrible public example designed to purge the land of their stain and to strike fear into the hearts of any who might contemplate such atrocities. The executions were carried out with a savagery that mirrored the clan's own. The men of the Bean family, including Sawney himself, suffered a particularly gruesome end. They were dismembered. Their hands and feet were cut off while they were still alive. Then their arms and legs were severed. They were left to bleed to death, their agonies a public spectacle. Their severed limbs, it is said, were thrown onto great bonfires, a grim offering to the outraged sensibilities of the populace. The air filled with the stench of burning flesh, a horrifying echo of the clan's own feasting. The women and children of the clan were forced to watch the protracted bloody deaths of their menfolk. Their screams and curses, some say, mingled with the groans of the dying. Once the men were dead, it was their turn. Black Agnes, the matriarch, and all her daughters and granddaughters were burned alive at the stake. They met their fiery end defiantly, spitting curses and prophecies of doom until the flames consumed them. The authorities sought to eradicate not just the individuals, but the very memory, the very seed of the Bean clan from the face of the earth. The public reaction was one of grim satisfaction, mingled with a profound sense of horror. Crowds gathered to witness the executions, a testament to the morbid curiosity and the desire for retribution that such crimes evoke. The Bean clan's demise was seen as a cleansing, a necessary excision of a cancerous growth from the body of Scotland. For a time the land breathed easier, the disappearances stopped, the roads were safe again. The story of Sawney Bean became a cautionary tale whispered by firesides, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk just beyond the fringes of civilization. A dark chapter, it seemed, had been decisively closed. Section 9 echoes in the dark history, myth or warning. The legend of Alexander Sawney Bean and his cannibal clan has echoed down the centuries. It is one of Scotland's most enduring and most gruesome folk tales. A story told to frighten children, to send a shiver down the spines of travellers, to remind us of the thin veneer of civilization, the sheer barbarity of their alleged crimes, the hidden cave, the inbred family of monsters. It all combines to create a narrative of compelling, nightmarish power. It has inspired books, films, and countless campfire stories, each retelling adding another layer to the myth. Yet for all its chilling detail, the historical authenticity of Sawney Bean remains a subject of fierce debate. Contemporary records from the supposed time of Bean's reign of terror, the late 15th or 16th century, are conspicuously silent. There are no court documents, no official chronicles, no letters from King James VI detailing his personal involvement in the manhunt. The earliest detailed accounts of the Bean legend appear much later, primarily in 18th century publications like Captain Charles Johnson's A General History of the Pirates and the sensationalist Newgate Calendar. This lack of contemporaneous evidence casts a long shadow of doubt over the tale. So what is the truth of Sawney Bean? Was he a real historical figure, his crimes perhaps exaggerated and embellished over time, transformed by storytellers into the ultimate bogeyman? Or is the entire saga a fabrication, a piece of folklore created to explain unexplained disappearances, to personify the fears of a dark and often brutal age? Perhaps it served as a piece of anti-Scottish propaganda in later years, or simply as a thrillingly macabre story for a public hungry for tales of gore and villainy. The answer remains elusive, lost in the mists of time. Ultimately, whether Sawney Bean truly lived and died in the manner described, or whether he's purely a creature of legend, his story retains its power. It speaks to something primal within us, our fear of the unknown, of the darkness that can exist within human nature, of the savage that lurks just beneath the surface of society. The cave on the Ayrshire coast, whether it truly housed a cannibal clan or not, stands as a potent symbol. The legend of Sawney Bean endures, a chilling whisper from the past, a question mark hanging in the shadows. Real or not, he lives on, a monstrous testament to the enduring power of a truly terrifying story.